The great hall of the Galactic Council stretched high above like a crystal cathedral. Ambassador Jiho Park sat at the human delegation table, his hands folded carefully in front of him. Around the circular chamber, representatives from 47 different worlds watched him with expressions that ranged from curious to hostile. Beside Jiho, Mina Lee shuffled through her digital files one more time. As Earth's military prosecutor, she had spent 3 months preparing for this moment. The charges against humanity were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. 17 separate civilizations had filed formal complaints, not about human aggression or territorial expansion, not about broken treaties or stolen resources. They were complaining about human mercy. The chamber fell silent as Council Speaker Zinth9 activated the central display. Holographic evidence materialized in the air above them. Images of alien soldiers writhing on battlefields. Medical reports showing psychological trauma that lasted 4 months. Testimonies from military commanders who begged for traditional warfare instead of human intervention. The Human Federation stands accused, Zinth9 announced in its mechanical voice, of systematic deployment of weapons that violate the Galactic Convention on Humane Warfare. Doyan Kim, Earth's military legal advisor, leaned forward in his chair. He had reviewed every case file, every medical report, every witness statement. The accusations seemed impossible. How could weapons designed to save lives be considered war crimes? The first witness took the stand. Commander Vexai of the Korthok Empire stood nearly 3 meters tall, his crystalline body reflecting the chamber's blue lights. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of a soldier who had seen too much. 3 months ago, human peacekeepers intervened in our border conflict with the Zalani Republic. Vexti began. They warned both sides to cease hostilities. When we refused, they deployed what they called non-lethal suppression systems. The holographic display showed the battlefield. Korthok warriors advancing across a rocky plain, their energy weapons blazing. Then the human devices activated. The sound came first. Vexai continued, his voice shaking slightly. Not loud enough to damage our hearing, they said. Just loud enough to make us stop fighting. They did not understand Korthok's physiology. The frequency resonated with our crystalline structure. Every warrior on that field experienced what you humans might call a migraine, amplified 1,000 times. Mina Lee checked her notes. The human report had classified the sonic disruptors as completely safe. Temporary discomfort, nothing more. Looking at the medical scans of Korthok soldiers, she saw brain patterns that suggested weeks of agony. That was not the worst part, Vexti said. The neural scramblers came next, signed to cause confusion and disorientation in human subjects for perhaps an hour. For my people, they created a complete disconnect between mind and body. Warriors found themselves unable to control their movements, unable to speak, unable to even close their eyes. Many remained in this state for 2 full months. The display shifted to show Korthok medical facilities. Rows of crystal beings lying motionless, their usually bright bodies dim and flickering. Medics moved between them, administering treatments that seemed to have little effect. Jiho watched the evidence with growing concern. The human military had provided detailed reports on their intervention. They had used standard crowd control technology, the same systems deployed at sporting events and protest sites across Earth. The weapons had been tested extensively on human volunteers. No lasting damage, no permanent effects, but humans were not Korthoks. The next witness stepped forward. Dr. Nala of the Hegemony of Minds was a telepathic species, a large head pulsing with soft purple light. When she spoke, her words carried emotional undertones that made several delegates shift uncomfortably. The humans deployed what they termed empathic disruptors against our forces, Dr. Nala said. They claimed these devices would simply make our soldiers feel sad and unwilling to fight. For humans, this might cause temporary depression. For telepathic species like mine, it created a feedback loop of despair that infected entire battalions. The holographic evidence showed hegemony soldiers abandoning their weapons and sitting in the mud, weeping uncontrollably. Some had to be carried from the battlefield by their own medics. The human report had noted this as a successful de-escalation with 0 casualties. 17 of my warriors attempted suicide in the weeks following exposure. Dr. Nalla continued. The empathic disruptors did not just make them sad. They made them experience the concentrated grief of every death that had ever occurred on that battlefield. The psychological trauma may take years to heal. Taiyan felt his stomach tighten. How to prove the use of empathic disruptors himself. The technology was based on human emotional regulation therapy. In controlled tests, human subjects reported feeling mildly melancholy for a few hours, followed by a sense of emotional clarity. The weapons designers had been proud of creating something that could end conflicts without bloodshed. The evidence continued. The Molten Collective testified about chemical agents that caused uncontrollable shedding of their metallic skin. The hive mind clusters spoke of biological weapons that disrupted their communication networks for weeks. The ethereal wanderers described devices that made their energy forms flicker uncontrollably, causing them to experience what they could only describe as existential terror. Each testimony followed the same pattern. Human weapons designed for human physiology, tested on human volunteers, deployed with good intentions. But each species reacted differently, caused minor discomfort for humans, became torture for others. Sun Ho Choi, sitting in the observer section, took careful notes. As a military historian, he understood how this had happened. Human warfare had evolved beyond simple killing centuries ago. After devastating global conflicts, human military doctrine had shifted toward psychological operations and non-lethal suppression. The goal was to make enemies surrender without dying. The problem was that human weapons designers had only ever considered human targets. Yoon Bi-yoon, a former Special Forces operator, watched the proceedings with professional interest. She had used many of these weapons herself. In her experience, they were remarkably effective. Enemy forces would typically surrender within hours of deployment, grateful to be alive, but unwilling to continue fighting. She had never considered what those same weapons might do to non-human physiology. As the testimonies continued, a pattern emerged. Human peacekeeping forces had intervened in dozens of conflicts across the galaxy. In every case, they had used what they considered humane alternatives to lethal force. In every case, the results had been far worse for alien species than for humans. The accusations were clear. Humanity had created weapons that were specifically designed to cause maximum psychological and physiological distress, while technically avoiding death. To the galaxy, this looked like sophisticated torture devices masquerading as mercy. Mina Lee began to understand the scope of the problem. This was not about human cruelty or malicious intent. This was about a species that had learned to weaponize suffering itself, then convinced themselves they were being merciful. The final witness of the day was perhaps the most disturbing. Colonel Dex of the United Republics had been present during multiple human interventions. His species was known for their stoic nature and high pain tolerance. I have been wounded many times in battle, Colonel Dex said, his voice steady and professional. I have lost limbs. I have been burned by plasma weapons. I have experienced what most would consider unbearable pain. But nothing prepared me for human non-lethal weapons. He gestured to the display, which showed footage of his own soldiers during a human intervention. They used something they called a comfort disruptor, designed to make human soldiers feel uncomfortable enough to surrender. For my people, it triggered every nerve ending simultaneously. My warriors experienced pain beyond description, yet remained conscious and aware. They begged for death, Some tried to end their own lives just to escape the sensation. The chamber fell silent. Even Zinthanine's mechanical hum seemed muted. The humans were genuinely surprised by our reaction. Colonel Dex continued. They offered medical assistance. They seemed truly concerned for our welfare. But they did not understand what they had done. To them, their weapons were mercy. To us, they were the cruelest instruments of war we had ever encountered. As the session adjourned, Jiho Park sat in stunned silence. The evidence was overwhelming, but the intent had been pure. Humanity had tried to find alternatives to killing, only to discover they had created something potentially worse. The galaxy was waiting for an explanation, and Jiho was not sure humanity had a good one to give. The second day of hearings began with humanity's turn to present their defense. Sunho Choi walked to the center of the chamber, carrying a small device that projected historical images into the air above the assembled delegates. As Earth's foremost military historian, he had spent his career studying how human warfare evolved from brutal killing to something more complex. Honored delegates, Sunho began, his voice calm and measured. To understand human military doctrine, you must first understand human history. We are a species that learned warfare from fighting ourselves. The holographic display showed ancient human battlefields, armies clashing with swords and spears, leaving thousands dead in single encounters. The alien delegates watched with interest as the images shifted through different eras of human conflict. For most of our existence, humans solved problems through violence, Sunho continued. We killed each other over territory, resources, ideas, and beliefs. Our wars grew larger and more destructive as our technology advanced. The display showed the great wars of human history. Millions of soldiers dying in trenches, cities reduced to ash by atomic weapons, entire generations lost to conflicts that solved nothing and created more problems. Yoon Bi-yoon stood from her seat in the human delegation area. As a former Special Forces operator, she had first-hand experience with the weapons that were now being questioned. Her military record showed 30 years of service across 12 different conflicts. May I address the council? Yoonbi asked. When permission was granted, she moved to stand beside Sunho. I have used every weapon system currently under review, she said simply. I helped test many of them. The development process was not about creating new ways to hurt people. It was about finding ways to stop conflicts without adding to the death toll. The holographic display shifted to show human military research facilities. Scientists and soldiers working together to test new technologies. The images showed volunteers submitting to various non-lethal weapons, documenting their effects, and suggesting improvements. Every system we developed was tested on human volunteers first, Yoonbi explained. Soldiers, like myself, we wanted to understand exactly what these weapons would do before we used them in combat situations. She gestured to the display, which now showed test subjects recovering quickly from exposure to sonic disruptors, neural scramblers, and empathic devices. The human volunteers experienced discomfort, but nothing that lasted more than a few hours. We believed we were creating humane alternatives to killing, Yoonbi said. In human testing, our non-lethal systems showed remarkable success. Subjects would surrender quickly, experience minimal lasting effects, and recover completely within days. Hoon Woo Nam, Earth's leading xenobiology expert, joined the presentation. He had spent decades studying alien physiology and psychology, though most of his work had focused on medical applications rather than military ones. The human development process had a fundamental flaw, Hyun Woo admitted. We tested our weapons only on humans. We did not consider how they might affect species with different nervous systems, different pain responses, or different psychological structures. The display showed comparative anatomy charts. Human neural networks compared to Korthok crystalline matrices, human emotional centers compared to hegemony telepathic nodes. The differences were striking and obvious in hindsight. Humans evolved as persistence predators, Hyun Woo explained. We hunted by following prey until it collapsed from exhaustion. This gave us unusual tolerance for discomfort and pain. What we consider minor inconvenience might be unbearable for species that evolved different survival strategies. Do-yeon Kim stepped forward to provide legal context. As military legal advisor, he had reviewed the development and deployment of every weapon system in question. The human military operates under strict rules of engagement, Do-yeon said. We are required to minimize casualties and avoid unnecessary suffering. Our non-lethal weapons were developed specifically to meet these requirements. He activated a section of the display that showed human military regulations. Pages of detailed rules about when and how non-lethal weapons could be used, requirements for medical support, mandatory surrender periods, detailed documentation of effects. Deployment of non-lethal systems included medical teams standing by to provide assistance. Do-yeon continued. When we discovered that these weapons affected alien species differently than expected, we immediately began providing medical support to affected individuals. The display showed human medics working alongside alien doctors in various conflict zones. The evidence clearly demonstrated that human forces had been surprised by the alien reactions and had worked to provide aid. Taeyeon Seo, military contractor who had designed several of the weapons in question, requested permission to speak. He looked uncomfortable as he approached the center of the chamber. I designed the comfort disruptor that caused such distress to Colonel Dex's forces, Taeyeon said quietly. The original concept came from human physical therapy. We use similar devices to treat chronic pain by temporarily overwhelming nerve signals. He showed technical specifications for the device. In human medical settings, the same technology helped patients by providing pain relief. The military application had simply scaled up the effect to cover larger areas. In human testing, the comfort disruptor caused subjects to feel like they needed to sit down and rest, Taeyeon explained. Test subjects compared it to the feeling after a long workout, uncomfortable but not painful. It never occurred to us that species with different nervous systems might experience it differently. Hyun Kang, who served as a medical coordinator for human peacekeeping forces, provided additional context about the human response to discovering these problems. When we first encountered unexpected reactions to our non-lethal systems, we immediately began emergency medical protocols, Yuna said. We reached out to alien medical specialists. We shared all of our technical data, provided any assistance requested. Displays showed communication logs between human and alien medical teams. Requests for information answered immediately. Technical specifications shared freely. Human doctors working around the clock to understand and treat alien patients. The human medical response proves that the effects were unintended, Yuna continued. If we had designed these weapons to cause maximum suffering, we would not have been so quick to provide aid when problems arose. Jin Woo, serving as humanity's damage control specialist, addressed the broader implications of the evidence. The pattern is clear across all 17 complaints, Jin Woo said. Human forces deployed non-lethal weapons, expecting results similar to those seen in human testing. When alien species reacted more severely than expected, human forces immediately ceased deployment and began providing medical assistance. He gestured to the comprehensive documentation displayed around the chamber. Medical records, communication logs, technical specifications, and witness statements all supported the same conclusion. This was not a deliberate campaign of torture, disguised as mercy, Jin Woo said firmly. This was a tragic failure to consider how human-designed systems might affect non-human physiology. Swon Han, the independent war crimes investigator, had been reviewing the evidence throughout the presentation. As someone with no allegiance to any particular species, Her analysis carried significant weight with the council. The evidence supports the human claim of unintended consequences, Su Yang announced. The pattern of immediate medical response, the willingness to share technical data, and the genuine surprise documented in military communications all indicate that these effects were not anticipated. She paused, looking around the chamber at the assembled delegates. However, she continued, intent does not eliminate responsibility. The human military deployed weapon systems without adequate testing across species lines. The results, regardless of intent, violated basic principles of humane warfare. The chamber fell silent as delegates considered this assessment. Humanity had not deliberately created torture devices, but they had created weapons that function as torture devices when used on non-human targets. Kyun Min, humanity's lead defense attorney, prepared to make her closing argument for this phase of the hearings. On it, delegates, the evidence shows that humanity approached warfare with the goal of preserving life, Kung Min said. We developed alternatives to killing because we had learned from our own destructive history. The failure was not in our intentions, but in our understanding. She gestured to the historical displays still floating in the chamber. Humans spent centuries learning to fight each other less lethally. We assumed that what worked for humans would work for all species. This assumption was wrong, but it was not malicious. The delegates began to murmur among themselves as they processed the human defense. The evidence was compelling, but the fundamental question remained. What should be done about weapons that were designed as mercy but functioned as torture? As the session adjourned, the complexity of the situation had become clear to everyone present. Humanity had not set out to create new forms of suffering, but good intentions did not erase the reality of alien soldiers still recovering from exposure to human, non-lethal weapons. The third day of hearings started differently than anyone expected. Xian Xiu had requested permission to demonstrate one of the disputed weapons to help the council understand human intentions. He stood at the center of the chamber, holding a small silver device no larger than a human hand. This is a crowd management unit, Taeyan explained to the assembled delegates. We use these at sporting events, concerts, and peaceful protests on Earth. The device creates mild disorientation that encourages people to move away from crowded areas. Unikong, the medical coordinator, had set up monitoring equipment around the chamber. She wanted to document the effects on different species for future reference. Several alien delegates had volunteered to observe the demonstration from a safe distance. The device has 3 power settings, Taeyan continued. I will use the lowest setting, which is designed for crowd control in areas with children present. The effect on humans lasts approximately 2 minutes and feels similar to standing up too quickly. Ambassador Jiho Park watched nervously from the human delegation area. The council had approved the demonstration, but he worried about potential complications. The past 2 days had shown clearly that human weapons affected aliens differently than expected. Do-Yan Kim had reviewed the safety protocols 3 times. The crowd management unit had never caused lasting harm to any human subject in over 50,000 test deployments. Medical teams from 6 different species were standing by in case of unexpected reactions. Activating device now, Taeyan announced. He pressed a small button on the silver unit. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The Korthok delegate began resonating like a struck crystal, producing a high-pitched whine that filled the chamber. Commander Vex Thai, who had testified on the first day, collapsed to the floor as his crystalline body flickered between different colors. Dr. Nala, of the hegemony of minds, screamed, clutching her large head with both hands. The telepathic species began broadcasting her distress to every other telepathic being in the chamber, creating a cascade of psychological panic. The molten collective representative started shedding metallic chunks of his body, leaving a trail of cooling metal fragments across the chamber floor. His temperature regulation systems appeared to be failing as he alternated between glowing red-hot and dull gray. Unicong rushed toward the affected delegates, her medical scanner beeping frantically as it tried to process the readings from multiple alien physiologies simultaneously. The device that was supposed to cause mild dizziness in humans was creating complete system failures in other species. "Turn it off," Jiho shouted from across the chamber. Taeyan fumbled with the device, pressing buttons rapidly. "It is off," he called back, his voice filled with panic. The effect should only last 2 minutes for humans, but the alien delegates were not recovering. If anything, their conditions seemed to be getting worse. The ethereal wanderer delegate began flickering in and out of visible existence, his energy form destabilizing in ways that looked genuinely dangerous. The chamber's emergency lights activated as his uncontrolled energy discharges interfered with the building's power systems. Su Young Han, the independent investigator, activated the chamber's emergency protocols. Medical teams from multiple species rushed into the room, carrying equipment designed for their specific physiologies. "This is exactly what we were talking about," gasped Colonel Dex as he helped carry the molten collective delegate to safety. "Humans design weapons for human biology and deploy them without understanding the consequences." Jin Wuru, the damage control specialist, worked frantically to coordinate the medical response. He had prepared for many possible complications. The sheer variety of adverse reactions happening simultaneously overwhelmed even his extensive planning. The Korthok medics arrived with specialized resonance dampeners to help Commander Vex Dai stabilize his crystalline structure. The telepathic support team used mental shields to isolate Dr. Nala from the emotional feedback loop she had created. Hyun-woo Nam ran between the affected delegates, taking readings with his xenobiology equipment. "The device is triggering different systems in each species," he reported to Yuna. "Inner ear damage in the Korthax, neural feedback in the telepaths, thermal regulation failure in the molten collective." 20 minutes passed before the situation stabilized. Every alien delegate who had been present during the demonstration required medical attention. The human delegates, including Taeyan, who had been standing closest to the device, showed no effects whatsoever. "I do not understand," Taeyan said quietly as medics worked around him. "The device produces simple vibrations at frequencies that affect human balance. It should not cause these reactions." Dr. Nala, now wearing a telepathic dampening device to protect her from further feedback, managed to speak despite her obvious pain. "Human balance systems are completely different from ours," she said weakly. "What affects your inner ear creates resonance in our telepathic nodes." The molten collective delegate, his temperature finally stabilized, added his own analysis. "Your vibrations interfere with our thermal regulation at the molecular level. What you experience as dizziness, we experience as complete system failure." Yoon Bi-yoon stood to address the chamber. "This demonstration proves our point about unintended consequences," she said. "But it also proves that human weapons are not designed to cause suffering. If we wanted to hurt other species, we would not have volunteered to demonstrate our weapons in front of the entire Galactic Council." Mina Lee was taking notes rapidly, documenting every aspect of the incident for the legal record. The demonstration had backfired spectacularly from a public relations standpoint, but it provided crucial evidence about human intentions and alien reactions. "The human reaction to this incident is telling," observed So Young Han. "They immediately tried to help. They shared all technical information. They submitted to questioning without resistance. This is not the behavior of people who design torture devices." Kyungmin, the defense attorney, saw an opportunity in the disaster. "Honored delegates, you have witnessed something unprecedented. Humans voluntarily demonstrating a weapon that they believe to be harmless, only to discover its true effects on non-human species. She gestured to the medical teams still working with affected delegates. Look at the human response. Panic, immediate assistance, complete cooperation with medical teams. Does this look like the reaction of people who knew their weapons would cause this kind of suffering? The chamber fell silent, except for the sounds of medical equipment and quiet conversations between doctors. The demonstration had created more problems than it had solved, but it had also provided clear evidence about human intentions. Dong-Yun Lee, standing with the medical coordination team, made an important observation. Every human in this chamber was exposed to the same device at the same intensity. None of us show any symptoms. This is not because we have better resistance to torture devices. This is because the device was designed specifically for human physiology. The implications were becoming clear to everyone present. Human, non-lethal weapons were not universal torture devices disguised as mercy. They were species-specific tools that worked exactly as intended on humans, but created unintended suffering when used on other species. We need new protocols, announced Council Speaker Cynthia. Weapons testing must include multiple species before deployment. Medical support must be specific. Communication between human and non-human forces must include detailed information about weapon effects. As medical teams continued their work, the delegates began to understand the scope of changes needed to prevent future incidents. The problem was not human cruelty or alien weakness. The problem was a complete lack of cross-species understanding in military technology development. Ji-Ho Park looked around the chamber at the medics, the damaged delegates, and the confused human team. The demonstration had been a disaster, but it had also been a revelation. Humanity had not set out to create interspecies torture devices. They had simply failed to consider that other species might react differently to human-designed technologies. The question now was whether the galaxy could find a way to move forward that protected everyone while still allowing for peacekeeping operations. The demonstration had shown that human weapons were dangerous to non-humans, but it had also shown that humans were willing to face that danger themselves and work to find solutions. The third day of hearings, Tia, ended with more questions than answers, but also with a clear understanding of what needed to change. The path forward would require unprecedented cooperation between species, but the alternative was a galaxy where human peacekeeping efforts continued to cause unintended suffering. As the chamber emptied, medical teams from multiple species worked together to ensure all affected delegates would recover fully. The sight of different species cooperating to solve problems created by misunderstanding gave some hope that similar cooperation might prevent future incidents. The fourth day of hearings brought a different atmosphere to the council chamber. After the demonstration disaster, both sides understood they were dealing with something more complex than simple war crimes. Kungmin Oh stood at the defense podium, ready to present humanity's formal legal strategy. Honored delegates, Kungmin began. The evidence from the past 3 days has shown us something unprecedented. We are not here to judge deliberate cruelty. We are here to decide how to handle the collision between human mercy and alien biology. She activated the chamber's display system, showing evolutionary charts of different species, human development, as persistence hunters appeared alongside the evolutionary paths of other civilizations. Humans evolved differently than every other species in this chamber, Kyungmin continued. We survived by chasing prey across vast distances until it collapsed from exhaustion. This made us capable of enduring discomfort that would disable other species. Dong-Yin Lee joined the presentation, carrying thick files of comparative research. As humanity's expert on interspecies law, he had spent months studying how different civilizations approach the concept of humane warfare. Every species defines cruelty based on their own biology, Dong-Yun explained. What humans consider mild discomfort, other species experience as torture. But the reverse is also true. Weapons that would kill humans instantly might only inconvenience species with different physiologies. The display showed examples from across the galaxy, quartz sonic weapons that would shatter human bones, but only caused mild vibration in their crystalline bodies. Hegemony mental probes that would drive humans insane, but served as normal communication for telepathic species. Minji Shin, Earth's leading military ethicist, approached the center of the chamber. She had studied the philosophy behind human non-lethal warfare development for decades. Human military ethics evolved from our own experiences with suffering, Mingi said. We learned to hate war because we experienced war. Our non-lethal weapons were designed to end conflicts without creating the deaths and destruction that scarred our own history. She gestured to historical images of human warfare. Families mourning dead soldiers, cities rebuilt after devastating battles. The progression from ancient weapons to modern non-lethal systems showed humanity's genuine attempt to find better ways to resolve conflicts. The human concept of mercy is based on preventing death, Minji continued. We assumed that anything which avoided killing was automatically more humane. We did not consider that temporary suffering might be worse than quick death for some species. Sung-Ho Park, a weapons developer who had worked on many of the disputed systems, requested permission to address the council. His hand shook slightly as he approached the speaking area. I designed the neural scramblers that caused such distress to Korthok forces, Sung-Ho said quietly. The original technology came from human medical treatment for seizures. Ali used these devices to temporarily reset brain activity in patients experiencing neurological emergencies. He showed technical specifications for the medical version of the technology. In human hospitals, neural scramblers saved lives by stopping dangerous brain activity patterns. When we adapted this technology for military use, we thought we were creating the most humane weapon possible, Sung-Ho explained. Test subjects experienced confusion for a few minutes, then recovered completely. It seemed perfect for stopping violence without causing harm. The display showed human test subjects recovering quickly from neural scrambler exposure. Scans confirmed no lasting damage. Psychological evaluations showed no trauma. The technology appeared to be exactly what human military ethics demanded. We never tested the devices on non-human subjects because we never thought they would be used on non-human subjects. Sung-Ho continued. Human peacekeeping forces were supposed to intervene in human conflicts. The expansion to interspecies conflicts happened faster than our testing protocols could adapt. Haon Kim, a philosophy professor from Seoul University, provided broader context about human moral frameworks. Her research on comparative ethics had been influential in developing interspecies diplomatic protocols. Human ethics are based on the principle of minimizing suffering, Haon explained. But we define suffering in human terms. A human who experiences temporary confusion and recovers quickly has not suffered significantly. A Korthok who experiences the same confusion for months has suffered greatly. She showed philosophical frameworks from different species. Ethics emphasized mental clarity above all else. Key morality focused on emotional stability. Each species had developed ethical systems based on their own vulnerabilities and strengths. The question before this council is not whether humans intended to cause suffering, Haon said. The evidence clearly shows they did not. The question is whether good intentions excuse harmful results when those results were predictable with proper testing. Kamen Yu, a young diplomatic aide, had been quietly researching legal precedents throughout the hearings. He stood to present findings that surprised even the human delegation. There is no existing legal framework for this situation, Changmin announced. Galactic law assumes that weapons are either lethal or non-lethal across all species. We have never dealt with weapons that are non-lethal for one species but torturous for others. He displayed legal codes from across the galaxy. Every civilization had laws about proportional response and humane treatment of enemies, but none had considered the possibility that mercy for one species might constitute cruelty for another. This creates a unique legal challenge, Changmin continued. How do we judge actions when the moral standards of one species directly conflict with the biology of another species? Jisoo Hong, the Council's Ethics Committee chair, had been observing the human defense with growing interest. Her committee was responsible for developing recommendations about how to handle this unprecedented situation. The human defense raises fundamental questions about universal versus species-specific ethics, Jisoo observed. If we accept that different species require different treatment, how do we maintain consistent legal standards across the galaxy? The chamber began to buzz with discussion as delegates considered the implications. Human, non-lethal weapons were judged by human standards. They were clearly humane. If judged by alien standards, they were clearly torture devices. Sang Yoon, KO, Humanity's military representative, stood to address the practical implications of the defense strategy. If this council rules that human peacekeeping forces cannot use human-designed, non-lethal weapons, the alternative is clear, Sang Yoon said grimly. We would have to choose between lethal force and no intervention at all. He showed deployment records for human peacekeeping forces. Over the past decade, they had intervened in 47 conflicts across the galaxy. The vast majority had ended without any deaths, though the alien suffering had been greater than intended. Human peacekeeping saves lives, Sang Yoon continued. The suffering caused by our non-lethal weapons is real and regrettable. But the alternative is allowing conflicts to continue until one side destroys the other completely. The display showed casualty projections for conflicts where humans had not intervened. The death tolls were consistently higher than the number of beings affected by human non-lethal weapons. Ye Ji Park, a young engineer who had been working on solutions throughout the hearings, requested permission to present preliminary research. We have been developing adaptive weapon systems during these proceedings, Yaji announced. Technology that can adjust its effects based on the target species' physiology. She showed early prototypes of weapons that included species-specific settings. The devices were larger and more complex than current human systems, but they promised truly non-lethal effects across multiple species. The technology exists to solve this problem, Yeji continued, but it will require cooperation between human engineers and alien biologists. We need to understand how our weapons affect other species before we can design better alternatives. The defense presentation was nearing its conclusion, but the implications were becoming clear to everyone in the chamber. Humanity had not committed war crimes in the traditional sense, but they had caused suffering through ignorance and assumption. Kyung-min Oh returned to the podium for her closing argument. This council faces a choice, she said. You can punish humanity for the unintended consequences of our attempts at mercy, or you can work with us to develop truly universal, non-lethal technologies that protect all species. She gestured to the mixed audience of humans and aliens in the chamber. The path forward requires cooperation, not condemnation. Humans have proven we are willing to share our technology, test our weapons publicly, and work toward solutions. The question is whether the galaxy is willing to work with us. As the fourth day of hearings concluded, the legal and ethical complexity of the situation had become clear to everyone involved. Humanity was not guilty of deliberate cruelty, but they were responsible for the consequences of their technological assumptions. The council would need to decide not just how to judge past actions, but how to prevent future suffering while maintaining the possibility of peaceful conflict resolution across species lines. The fifth and final day of hearings arrived, with tension filling every corner of the council chamber. Judge Wu Jinjiang, appointed as the session's chief arbiter, sat at the elevated bench reviewing 5 days of testimony, evidence, and arguments. Representatives from across the galaxy waited quietly for his decision. Neon Lim, representing the prosecution, stood to deliver her final argument. She had spent the night reviewing medical reports from all 17 complainant species, preparing to make one last case for holding humanity accountable. Honored Judge Jiang, Naiying began, the evidence is clear. Human weapons have caused systematic suffering across multiple species and conflicts. Intent does not eliminate responsibility. When the results are this consistent and this severe. She activated the display one final time, showing medical scans of alien soldiers still recovering from exposure to human non-lethal weapons. Some had been in treatment for months, with no clear timeline for recovery. The Korthok warriors who cannot control their crystalline resonance, the hegemony telepaths who still experience emotional feedback loops, the molten collective soldiers whose temperature regulation systems remain damaged. These beings deserve justice for their suffering. Yan paused, looking directly at the human delegation. The humans claim they acted with good intentions, but good intentions do not heal damaged minds or restore lost abilities. The galaxy needs protection from human definitions of mercy. Judge Wu Jinjiang listened carefully, taking notes on a digital tablet. As an experienced legal mind, he understood that this case would set precedents for interspecies conflict resolution across the galaxy. Kyungmin stood to deliver humanity's final defense. She carried a simple folder containing just a few pages of notes, having decided to speak from the heart rather than rely on complex legal arguments. Judge Jiang, prosecution is correct that intent does not eliminate responsibility. Kyungmin said, humanity accepts responsibility for the unintended suffering our weapons have caused. But we ask the court to consider what happens if human peacekeeping ends because of these rulings. She gestured to the alien delegates who had testified about conflicts where humans had intervened. Before human involvement, the Korthok-Zalani border war had killed thousands and showed no signs of ending. The Hegemony Republic conflict was escalating toward mutual destruction. Human intervention stopped those wars with minimal casualties. The chamber remained silent as delegates considered this perspective. Human peacekeeping had saved millions of lives, even if it had caused unintended suffering to thousands. We do not ask for forgiveness without offering solutions. Kelman continued. Humanity proposes a new framework for interspecies peacekeeping that protects all species while maintaining our ability to prevent conflicts. Chai Min-yu, the young diplomatic aide, stood with a document folder thick with research and proposals. His work over the past 5 days had focused on finding practical solutions rather than just legal arguments. The Human Federation formally proposes the creation of universal non-lethal weapon standards, Changmin announced. All weapons designated as non-lethal must be tested on volunteers from at least 5 different species before deployment. The proposal included detailed testing protocols, mandatory cross-species medical support, and technology sharing agreements. Human weapons manufacturers would work directly with alien biologists to understand the effects of their technologies. We also proposed the creation of the Interspecies Military Ethics Board, Changman continued. This body would include representatives from all major galactic civilizations and would review new weapons technologies before they could be deployed in multi-species conflicts. Stu Hong, the Council's Ethics Committee chair, had been working with her team to evaluate the human proposals. The suggestions were comprehensive and showed genuine commitment to preventing future incidents. The human proposals addressed the core problems identified during these hearings, Jisoo announced. They acknowledge responsibility while providing practical solutions. The Ethics Committee recommends accepting these proposals as the foundation for new galactic protocols. Sang Yu and Ko stood to address the military implications of the proposed changes. The Human Federation commits to retrofitting all existing non-lethal weapons with species-specific settings within 2 standard years. We will share all technical specifications with the Interspecies Military Ethics Board. He showed preliminary designs for adaptive weapon systems that could automatically adjust their effects based on target species identification. The technology was complex, but achievable with cooperation from alien specialists. We also commit to joint training programs with other species military forces, Sang-Yoon continued. Human peacekeepers will learn about alien physiology and psychology. Alien forces will learn about human peacekeeping techniques that can be safely adapted for their own use. Yeji Park approached the center of the chamber, carrying a prototype device that represented months of intensive development work. The young engineer had worked around the clock to create a demonstration of truly universal non-lethal technology. This is the first truly interspecies non-lethal weapon, Yeji announced, holding up a device that looked significantly different from traditional human designs. It includes biological scanners that identify target species and automatically adjust effects to ensure safety across all known physiologies. She showed technical specifications that had been developed with input from biologists representing 12 different species. The device was larger and more expensive than current human weapons, but it promised genuinely humane effects for all galactic civilizations. Mass production could begin within 1 standard year if the Council approves the necessary technology sharing agreements, Yaji continued. Within 5 years, truly universal non-lethal weapons could replace all species-specific systems across the galaxy. Judge Wu Jinjiang had been listening carefully to all the proposals and evidence. The legal precedent he was about to set would affect interspecies relations for generations to come. This court finds that the Human Federation did not commit deliberate war crimes, Judge Zhang announced. However, the deployment of insufficiently tested weapon systems constitutes negligent harm to non-human populations. The chamber held its breath as he continued. Therefore, this court orders the following remedies. First, the Human Federation will provide full medical support for all beings affected by the non-lethal weapons until complete recovery is achieved. Second, all existing human non-lethal weapons are banned from use in multi-species conflicts until they meet the new universal non-lethal weapons standards. Ji-hoon, on the human military attach, breathed a sigh of relief. The ruling was serious but fair, and it provided a clear path forward for continued human peacekeeping operations. Third, Judge Zhang continued, the Human Federation will lead the development of the Interspecies Military Ethics Board and will share all weapons, its technology freely with member civilizations. Fourth, the new universal non-lethal weapon standards will be mandatory for all galactic civilizations, not just humanity. The final point surprised many delegates. The new standards would apply to everyone, preventing future incidents regardless of which species developed new technologies. The court recognizes that this incident arose from humanity's unique approach to warfare. But the solutions must be universal, Judge Zhang explained. All civilizations must commit to cross-species testing and cooperation in military technology development. Swang Han, the independent investigator, stood to address the implementation timeline. The investigation team will monitor compliance with these orders and provide quarterly reports to the Galactic Council. We estimate full implementation within 5 standard years. As the session concluded, delegates from across the galaxy began approaching the human delegation with offers of cooperation. The Korthok offered their expertise in crystalline-based technologies. The hegemony proposed sharing their understanding of telepathic effects. Even the Molten Collective expressed interest in joint development projects. Mina Lee gathered her legal files with a sense of satisfaction. The prosecution had achieved its goal of protecting alien populations from human weapons, while the defense had succeeded in preserving humanity's role in galactic peacekeeping. 10 years from now, warfare across the galaxy will be fundamentally different, Mina observed to her colleagues. Humans tried to wage war more humanely and failed because they only understood humanity. Now we will all learn to wage war more humanely for everyone. The council chamber began to empty as delegates returned to their homeworlds to begin implementing the new protocols. The sight of former adversaries working together to solve the problems created by human innovation gave hope that similar cooperation could address other challenges facing the galaxy. Ambassador Jiho Park remained in his seat long after most delegates had left, reflecting on the week's events. Humanity had faced serious accusations and emerged with both accountability and opportunity. The galaxy had judged them fairly and offered them a chance to turn their mistake into progress for everyone.